on my last straw. I'm broken.
Bună, dragilor! Astăzi am fost la... Nu este de fapt o lansare de carte, pentru că este o carte apărută de ceva timp la Corint, dar nu de foarte mult timp. Și am fost la Colegiul Pedagogic din Constanța, pentru că a venit autoarea cărții, Miracolele Mirandei. A fost o întâlnire foarte frumoasă și n-am mai fost de mult la ceva de acest tip și mi-era dor. Și am primit și autograful, am auzit povești despre carte și despre alte cărți și nu știu, a fost așa un vibe foarte plăcut. Și chiar pot să zic că mie mi-a plăcut la nebunie cartea aceasta și vă recomand cu mare drag. Eu aș vrea să o citesc și în engleză, pentru că a fost o carte destul de emoționantă. Autoarea era foarte amuzantă pentru că nu vedea foarte bine la apropiere și când ne-a lăsat autografe sau voia să citească ceva, l-a mai rugat și pe soțul ei să o ajute. Dar mi-a plăcut foarte mult cum a vorbit așa cu căldură și nu știu, este plăcut când descoperi așa oameni calzi și cărți frumoase. Cred că o să mă opresc un pic, am obosit. Și da, aceasta este cartea, vă voi lăsa să o vedeți mai bine. Eu acum mă duc spre casă, pentru că mai am treabă, dar o să mai inserez poate imagini de la lansarea de carte. Și cei de la Corin Junior au fost foarte amabili și m-au invitat și pe mine. Oricum, oricine era binevenit. În caz că sunteți din București, o să fie și acolo lansarea aceasta, dar din păcate nu cred că apuc eu să postez la timp. Anyway, aceasta e cartea, aceasta sunt eu și mi-a părut bine să vă invit alături de mine la acest mic eveniment literar foarte drăguț.
Verbă care poate fi citită pe straturi, să știți, de la clasa 1 până foarte târziu, fiindcă personajele din această carte sunt din mai multe generații și fiecare generație are ceva de spus. Generația Mirandei, eroina cărții, bunica Mirandei, are de spus o mulțime de lucruri și că foarte interesante. Și așa, astăzi, tot căutând și tot căutând, o avem aici, la Constanța, pe una dintre cele mai interesante scriitoare irlandeze. Scriitoare pentru copii. Și am făcut mai devreme o glumă. Se pare că este primul scriitor după Bram Stoker care ajunge în România. Și s-ar putea să nu mă înșel. Dragii mei, o avem aici pe Siobhan Parkinson, care mai departe de la ce înseamnă să fie scriitor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to come out. I don't like this today. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Sunt ferit că sunt în România. Sunt scriitor irlandez. Mă numesc. My name is?
Yes, yes.
Siobhan Parkinson. Okay. He told you all that already, but I'm telling you now in your own language again, okay? So I'm very, very glad to be here. It's lovely to meet you all. And I have no relationship of any sort with Bram Stoker, okay? It's not my fault, okay? He came from the same city, but that's as me, but that's the only connection. So I've been writing for children and adults and teenagers and small children and bigger children. Could be, is that right, children?
Yes.
For a long time, for about 30 years maybe. So I've written a lot of books for different age groups and of different types, and I write in English and I write in Irish, which is a very different language that we have in Ireland. It's a language which is the official language of the country, but it's spoken really by not very many people every day. This is Ireland. Now, So This little bit of Ireland here, the top right-hand corner, that little bit is Northern Ireland, and that bit belongs to the UK, right? For historical reasons, which I will not go into. That bit is part of the UK. But the country, most of the country, is the Republic of Ireland, and we are definitely still in the United, so then, the only stories that I knew of that had to do with Ireland when I was growing up were Irish fairy tales. And this book was an important introduction to Irish fairy tales for Irish children when I was small. It was called Irish Fairy Tales. And then there was a writer called Patricia Lynch who wrote about Ireland as well. So I read her books. But really, it wasn't until I was an adult and came to writing myself that books for children by Irish people for Irish children came to be written in Ireland in any big numbers. And then there was a sudden explosion in Ireland in the early 20th century. And that was it was only when I wrote this book that I realised that actually, yes, I am a children's writer. This is what I do. Possibly this is four kids, 3 cats, 2 cows, 1 witch, maybe. It's very hard to remember the title. Even the author has difficulty remembering the title. When I first wrote the book, I wanted to call it Once Upon an Island, because it is about 4 children who go off to have an adventure on an island. And of course, I was drawing on my own childhood reading, the books that I read by Enid Blyton, the one I showed you earlier, The Secret Island. Islands were a big motif in her books, and the children in her stories very often went off to islands on their own and had adventures. So I thought I would like to write a story with that idea, as the overarching idea, about children going to an island. So I had the children go to the island, and I decided it was one of those islands that we have off the coast of Ireland. We have some islands that you can reach from the mainland, from the shore, at low tide. When the tide is very low, the water is hardly any water, and you can walk out to the island. So the children did this. In my story, the children did this. They walked out to the island. They found themselves in the island. They were delighted with themselves. It's all quite fun, la la la, how nice. And they forgot, of course, that if the tide goes low and allows you to walk out to the island, then, of course, also the tide comes back up again, and then you get stuck on the island. So the children are they're stuck on the island. They can't get off the island because the water has risen. So there they are on the island, and what are they going to do? How are they going to? They have to wait for the water to go away. But what are they going to do in the meantime to amuse themselves? So what they do is they tell each other stories, right? So each child in the group of children tells the other children a story, and they make up the stories. And that's why I wanted to call the book Once Upon an Island, because once upon a time is a formula that's used for fairy stories in English usually begin with once upon a time. There was a princess, or there was a... So people seem to think that she maybe is a witch. So he wrote down one witch. I said, no, she's not a witch. I'm just saying that people think she's a witch. Maybe she's a bit witch-like. He said, okay, one witch, maybe. And he wrote maybe in brackets. Then he read the title. He said, 4 kids, 4 cats, 2 cows, 1 witch. And he said, no, it doesn't work. We have to have 3 cats, not 4 cats. So he said, 4 kids, 3 cats, 2 cows, 1 witch. Lovely title, I love it. I said, yeah, but the problem is there are 4 cats in the story. And he said, too bad, go home and kill a cat. So, I'm afraid you see before you a cat murderer. I had to go home and rewrite a little bit of the story so that I got rid of one of my cats. And that's how the book came to be called 4 Kids, 3 Cats, 2 Cows, 1 Witch, Maybe. I made him put the maybe in because I really wasn't sure that she was a witch. So, somebody mentioned, somebody who was talking to me about coming here said, I'm really intrigued by the title of this book, so that's why I'm telling you the story, and because it has the anecdote about having to murder the cat. Okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll tell you about the inspiration for this book, because usually one of the things people often ask writers is, where do you get your inspiration? And usually my answer is, I don't know. I don't ever feel particularly inspired. I just go and I write, and as I write, I find my story, and that's true. I sit down at my computer, and I start to write, and I write a sentence, and then I write another sentence, and then I write another sentence, and as I look at the sentences that I'm writing, I can see a pattern beginning to emerge. I can hear a voice in my head, who's the character who's telling the story, and then gradually, over time, I find my story. So that's usually how I write. And I'm not aware of having a particular source of inspiration. But in the case of this particular book, there was an event that started it off. There was a source of inspiration. So I was in Paris, and I was doing an event like this, except it was mostly younger children. Some of the children were very young, and people came to the event with their children. Adults came and they brought their children with them, and because here was an Irish person in Paris, an Irish writer in Paris for children, that's kind of an interesting idea. So people came, and they were mostly Irish people who lived in Paris, and they brought their children with them. So this man came in, and he was carrying a little girl. And the little girl did not want to be at this. She didn't want to meet an Irish author. She was really bored and fed up, and this is not something she wanted to do with her Sunday afternoon or whatever it was. She wanted to go and play or something. And she didn't want to be there. She was very reluctant. So she had her head buried in her dad's shoulder, and she wasn't going to talk to me or look at me or say anything. So he came in, he sat down in the front row, and the little girl sat on his knee, and she looked away. She didn't want to talk. So as I talked, and I told them some stories, and I read a little bit to them, she eventually began to warm up. And after a little while, she climbed down off her dad's knee, and she sat on her own chair, and she started to listen. And by the end of the talk, she was obviously quite interested. So she came over, she was about 7, and she came over to me at the end, and she spoke to me, and she said, "Do you ever write miracles?" And I said, "Do I ever write miracles? What? Oh, I write stories. What do you mean I write miracles?" And she said, no, but do you ever write miracles? So I said, "Well, explain to me what you mean by that." And of course, she couldn't really explain it. She said, well, miracles, when amazing things happen. I said, "Yeah, I know what a miracle is, but I don't know what you mean by writing a miracle." I said, "Do you mean, do I write fantasy? Do I write magic stories? What on earth do you mean by writing a miracle?" And she was really a bit puzzled herself now that she asked the question. And eventually she just screwed up her face and she said, "Well, if you make something up in your head," I'm a writer, I know I make something up in my head. You make something up in your head and you write it down, and it's lovely. So that was her definition of writing a miracle, that you wrote something, you made it up in your own head, you wrote it down, and it was lovely. So I said, "Oh, well, yes, I suppose, I hope I do that from time to time. I make things up and I write them down, and they're lovely. I hope so." Anyway, yes, I said, I do write miracles in that case. And we had a little chat, and she was a nice girl, and I met her parents, and it was all very, very pleasant. But when I went home after that meeting with the little girl, I began to think about the idea of what could it mean to write a miracle, because it's a really interesting idea. Afterwards, I realized that this little girl grew up in a very literary household, and Seamus Heaney, who is our famous national poet, who died some years ago, and he was the Nobel Prize winner, this is a phrase he used, writing miracles. So this little 7-year-old had heard her parents, obviously, or somebody who came to visit her parents, using this phrase of Seamus Heaney's, and that's where she heard the phrase writing miracles, and that's why she asked me the question. But I began to think, well, what could it mean to write a miracle? And I thought, it's not enough that you just write it down and it's lovely. And I began to imagine a child who might think they could write a miracle. So as I thought about it, it began to clarify for me, and I thought, suppose there's a little girl and she really, really wants a miracle to happen. could she maybe imagine that she might be able to create the miracle by writing? Because this is a girl who spent a long time writing. She's she's going to be a writer. She's interested in stories, she's interested in words. So she sees herself as a writer. On the blackboard, in the dining room.
Apparently it's in the school as well.
It's in the school as well? Oh. Well, there you go. So miracles do happen. They definitely do happen. So it's obviously a very well-known... we were very, very astonished when we saw this, because we thought this is like a sign. We've come here to talk about writing miracles, and here is one of your writers talking about the importance of believing in miracles. There's lots and lots of things about miracles and magic happenings and extraordinary things in the Miranda story, and that's really what it's all about. So I thought that was pretty miraculous. And the fact that I've come here to this school and you have that quotation as well, that's pretty cool actually. I think that's really pretty cool. Now, what else am I going to talk about? Maybe you want to read a little bit from Miraculous Miranda. This is going to be from the English version, because our Romanian is really not up to anything more than that. Will I give you the microphone, Roger? Oh yeah, I can't read, by the way. So here I am, and I'm a writer. I spent all my life writing, but I can't read. And the reason I can't read is that I have an eyesight problem, which I have had for many, many, many years. And it means that I can see lots of things. I can see the chair, I can see the yellow bag. I wasn't quite sure of this little girl here because I couldn't see her very clearly. So I don't see very well, and I certainly can't read. So Roger is my husband. He is going to read a little bit from the book, just to give you an idea of what's going on.
So there's the little girl, the girl I should say, Miranda is telling the story, and she's got there's a boy in her school called Darren, who is a boy, and she doesn't particularly like him. Anyway, so I'm going to read a few extracts from the book.
Short ones, it's okay.
Short ones, yeah. I got, and this is about fantasy geography. I got the idea for fantasy geography from Darren, in a way, because he plays a game called fantasy football. Fantasy geography is much more fun than real geography, because for that you have to learn a whole lot of things like population and capital cities and trade winds, none of which is at all interesting. But for fantasy geography, you just make places up. I made a drawing of my fantasy country, which is called Magnanimous. Only it is more like a map with labels on things, so you know what they are called and what they are for. I have decided it is an island, because all the best countries are, in my personal opinion, especially Ireland and Iceland. I have never been to Iceland, but a place that has geysers has to be good. My gran does not agree about that, but that's grand for you. I made a city too called Splendiferous, with silver gates around it and giraffes for police, because they can see over the roofs and catch the burglars in their mouths and give them a good shaking, and all the swag comes rattling out of their pockets and backpacks, diamonds and goldy things and cutlery with curlicues on the handles. Curlicues is a grand word, but I like it, not like most of our words. Also, they get dizzy and headachy, the burglars, and their bones hurt from being shaken, which is better than going to jail for making people stop being burglars, and also much cheaper. I think it is a miracle kind of place, actually. And just back to you. Okay. Yeah. So she then talks about Miranda writing about her fantasy country. There's a problem on the fantasy country, which is a bacteria farm. So there is this bacteria farm in Magnanimous. It is a long way from the city, way out in the middle of the bog, where people can't get infected by it. But still, a bacteria farm is not a good thing to have on an inhabited island, and all the people were wondering what could be done about it, because the inhabitants of Magnanimous are caring people, by and large. The very tallest giraffe, who is, of course, the chief of police, decided that the best solution would be if all the police giraffes mounted an attack on the bacteria farm. Not to destroy the farm itself, just to stamp out all the bacteria. So he deployed all his troops, every last giraffe of them, and off they went out onto the bog to stamp out the bacteria. At first, it all went swimmingly. The giraffes had a great time kicking up their heels, and they did manage to stamp out quite a lot of the bacteria with their big, clumpy giraffe feet. But after a while, the bacteria started to fight back, and instead of taking all that stamping lying down, they took up residence in the giraffes' hooves, and now the giraffes have foot rot, which is a distant relation to tummy rot, but a lot more painful. So now, the giraffes have to stay out in the bacteria farm, because they have to be in isolation in case they give the foot rot to everyone else. The very tallest giraffe had to send some people out with cherry pickers to feed them, because there are no trees out there on the bacteria farm, and the giraffes will not get better unless they are well fed and their immune systems are kept topped up.
Coronavirus in our world. But when we were looking at the book on the plane yesterday on our journey over here, Roger picked out this piece and said, I think this would be a really good piece to read just now, because it's almost as if I wrote it on purpose to describe the what's happening with the virus, except of course we all know that viruses and bacteria are completely different things, because we're very good scientists. And I'm going to open up to the floor now in a moment. I'm going to ask you to ask me questions, and you can do some of the talking for a change. But before I do, I'm going to tell you one last little story. It was a nice thing that happened to me yesterday. See this book here? This one is called Alexandra, and it's a story I wrote many, many, many years ago, and it's about a little girl who's only about 4 years of age, so it's meant for very, very, very young children. And it was published, it was originally written actually for television, for the Irish television asked me to write some stories for very small children, so I did, and then...
You are gonna make other books from real kids?
The books that I write, or the books that I publish? The books that I write? Do I write books about real children?
Yes.
Yes. That's a very good question. I'll tell you the answer now. Mostly, the people in my books are characters that I make up, I invent, but actually Alexandra, the one I just told you about, that's going to be published in China, is based on my niece. You know what a niece is? It's my sister's daughter. So she's now grown up, but I wrote these stories a very long time ago when she was a little girl, and the stories are about things that happened to the real little girl. So that story is about a real kid. Yeah. Irish, I have good Irish, but I don't use Irish in my everyday life. I'm not very fluent. So for me, to write a book in Irish is quite a big deal. So, as I say, my third book for adults is in the Irish language, and it's very recent. I've also written a couple of books for children in Irish, but mostly I write for children. I've written about maybe 20, 25 books for children, and 3 for adults. So you can see the balance.
Wondered if you want to give up on your career?
Oh. Is this a piece of advice? You mean my career as a writer? What? My career as a writer? Yeah, sometimes I do think, I don't know if I'll ever bother writing another book. And then, something happens and you think, actually I feel I should do it. I write because I enjoy writing. I don't write because I feel I have to, and I don't write for money, because there's no money in it. I can tell you that for sure. Unless, some people, okay, J.K. Rowling made a lot of money, but generally speaking, there's not very much money in writing, especially not writing for children. So I don't do it because I have to, I do it because I want to. So even though every now and again I might say, oh, I don't think I'll ever bother again, then you get the urge, you know, and you feel, oh, I really would like to write something, so then you go and do it. So the answer is yes and no. Another question.
When you were little, you were like Miranda or no? Do I say in English Miranda? I don't know. Okay. When you were little, you were like Miranda? Yes. Yes. Oh, and your grandmother was like real, like that. Yes, my mom. Yes.
See. Okay, well, the question was, when you were little, you were like Miranda? And the answer is, when I was little, I was like Miranda. Yes, I was definitely a bit like Miranda. But my grandmother wasn't like the granny in the book, no, I made her up. Actually, my grandmother, the granny in the story is based on somebody I used to know a long time ago, and she was somebody I was working with. She was a colleague of mine, and she wasn't nasty at all, but she did smoke all the time. She was always smoking, and she used to walk around the office. Before smoking was banned in offices, she used to walk around the office with a big long ash on her cigarette, and she would tap it into her hand, and then she'd walk around with cigarette ash in her hand. So I put her in the book, but she wasn't nasty. The granny isn't really nasty either. It's just that Miranda is feeling a bit cross. Yeah. That's also a very good question. Now, I think I have a few more now. People are not a bit warmed up.
Do you have any advice for the teenagers here? Not especially for the ones who like to write, but for all of them.
Whoa. Okay, not about writing particularly, just about life, yeah? Okay. When adults tell you that your school days are the best days of your life, do not believe them. They are lying. It gets better, I promise you it gets better. Being an adult is much easier than being a child or a teenager. Because, okay, you have more responsibilities when you're an adult, of course, but you have to make your own living. Your mum and dad don't give you food money all the time, but you do have much more control over your life. So I think when you're at school, you have to go to school, you have to learn the stuff, you have to go through being a child, but actually being an adult is much easier. So that's my advice is, stick it out, it will be over.
What is your favorite quote? What is your favorite quote? Your favorite quote?
My favorite quote?
Yes. I also liked the quote from the beginning of Miranda, and I cannot wait to read it in English.
Oh, the one about the monkey with lollipop paws?
Yes.
I don't think I have a favorite quote. I think you find the quote that you want for the situation, but I don't have a general favorite quote. However, I do love that poem.
Yes, it's a lovely poem.
Yes. It's really good, it's very funny. So, yeah. So the quote from the beginning of Miraculous Miranda is Edward Lear, isn't it? Yeah. It's the Junglies. The Junglies. Yeah. But I can't really answer the question. Yeah.
Thank you.